Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Legendarium Green Team. Today we're going to be talking about Ghostwater, the fifth book in the Cradle series. I'm the host, Cesky, and today I have with me Eradandis,
Hello, everybody.
and I also have with me the Soulution.
Hi.
So, first off, did you guys enjoy Ghostwater? I know I enjoyed it. I can't say it's my favorite out of all of the books, but I did think it was worth the read. What about you guys?
I enjoyed it quite a lot. This is my second favorite of the currently 8 that are out right now.
And Era?
I think it was a letdown from the previous two books.
All right. Strong
Oof.
words from Eric
Yeah.
coming out hot today. Let down. So,
Uh-huh.
I guess we should talk about what happens in this book. Lyndon and Yaren are sent off with their handlers to investigate a pocket dimension. They're separated, they train, people die, they get reunited at the end. Did I miss anything really important here?
Yeah, you missed Ross.
You summed up most of the Cradle books. Yeah. He is. That's true.
So, like I said, that's kind of just the barest of bones, walkthroughs of what happens in the book. What were some of your guys' favorite parts or least favorite parts of this book? You can go as general or as deep as you'd like. Soulution, give us one of yours.
Okay, so we'll start out with just some interesting moments. Is when Lyndon is first getting into Ghostwater, he has all these true goals, and he's just a low goal. He watches Renfei die, which is in itself a very cool scene because most of us hate Renfei, so that's cool. I mean, I don't want to see her die, but I was like, you know what, it's okay. So, anyways, he's basically going into this other bubble. He's swimming with orthos, and they go and hide, and they're hiding for their life, and they're scared. And it was kind of like a nice traumatic scene to watch him be in a completely unfamiliar environment on his own with just orthos. No Ithan, no Yiren, no Mercy. It's just him.
Okay. And Era?
I'll give you 3 favorites and then one least favorite. And
Okay.
and here's the way I'll do it, because the favorites really don't take up a lot of the book, because the bulk of the book is on least favorite. So 1, Yiren. I liked everything. I like Yiren's arc in this book a lot, especially compared to everybody else. I like her arc. 2, Ithan. Like the little flash we got of Ithan and kind of how he maneuvered to kind of get back with everybody. I like that little vignette where he kind of does that maneuvering. So I thought that was nice, and there was a little bit more. You see a little bit more serious Ithan beneath the facade of cheerfulness that he has.
Definitely.
And the 3 was Dross, the character that Lyndon finds. He says there's this one phrase that he says, which is made as a kind of a joke, but it's actually kind of deep if you think about it. And I'm just going to read it because I like it. It says, some believe that hope, and hope is italicized, is the strongest force in the universe, Dross said, although that is objectively untrue.
I also like that line. I was going to
That
put
is a
it
good
in,
line.
but I didn't, so.
I just want to go ahead and just put that out there. I just want everybody to think about that. For a book that's not super deep, that's actually that's a pretty deep thought,
Mhm.
So just think about that. Anyways, so I did like that. Least favorite is Lyndon. I just did not enjoy at all his arc in this story. I felt it was dreadfully boring. Sorry, but I just found his arc boring, and I did not like the circumstances in which. Let me see if I can rephrase that. I don't like the way he got to the starting point of this. It unlike other parts of the book, and I want to contrast this with other positive parts of Lyndon. Lyndon is generally a very planned person. He aggressively seeks his goals. He doesn't just things don't just fall into his lap. Usually, he forces his way into situations to achieve his goals, or somebody puts him there purposefully to have him advance. This one, he just falls into this little mini realm purely by chance. And then he achieves his goals again in what I consider to be a not very exciting manner.
I think that's a very fair and somewhat accurate. I think I'll have a couple of points I want to make with you later and see if you kind of agree or disagree with me. But some of my favorite scenes are just Dross. He's like such a child, and he just says whatever comes to his mouth first. You know, when he first meets him and he's like, "Hey, I'm talking with you," and he's like, "Yeah, well, I imagine debating with like great minds and like debating like world philosophies, and you're just you, and this is boring. Like I thought talking would be cooler." Or when and near the end, he's working to make something for Lyndon, and he's looking at Little Blue, his Riven Seed, and he's like, "A little moral support would be nice here." And she raises her hand and cheers.
Cheers,
And
bro.
he's like, "Oh, thanks. That's exactly what I wanted right now." And it's just like, it's just so funny. And at some points he has some good parts that are more like philosophical than not funny, but he's just like a constant source of refreshment in this kind of dark and dreary part for Lyndon, where he's separated and kind of alone, and he's not used to that anymore. So having Dross was a good spot for me.
I want to agree with that. I mean, and I think you guys will talk about this, but Dross is entertaining. There's no question about it. Dross is very entertaining, but I consider Dross to be, at least for most of the book, to be a separate character from Lyndon.
Oh, he definitely is.
Oh
yes.
yeah, for sure he is a separate character. Now, you said something there that I wanted to touch on a little bit. You said that for the series that we're reading, Cradle, and we all know it's kind of a level 1, a popcorn fantasy / entertainment kind of reading book.
Right.
But I want to put that there. If you look, there are quite a lot of level 2, maybe not as many level 2, but there's definitely some level 3 stuff. But it's just not, at least in my mind, put out, like spelled out for people, or maybe it is spelled out for people too much. Like the perspective, the very beginning of the book, we see Mu Enkai, who will henceforth name the Eggman, who gets a piece of the bleeding phoenix, and it grants him great power, right? And
Yeah.
then this power, he just takes over his whole, everyone around him.
Right.
He becomes the boss. I'm in charge. I've got the power. Oh, you stood up to me at all. You're out. I'll kill you. And it just, it's to me, it was a thought of, that absolute power. He thought he had absolute power, and that corrupted him absolutely, very quickly, at least. I mean, do you have any thoughts about the same kind of thing, Era?
So, Cesky, I'm glad that you mentioned. I'm going to call the prologue was like the very first chapter and a half.
Mhm.
I was so excited when I started reading that first part. I'm like, wow, we're gonna get deep. We're gonna go somewhere with this, and then this guy gets taken off the map, and dealt with, and then they move on, and just it drops off. So I'll say this. I agree kind of like with your initial point, but then it gets disposed of and then discarded. And that kind of disappointed me, I guess, for lack of a better word. It's not addressed. So to your point, yes, it gets brought up, but then it doesn't really get addressed. It just gets dealt with like a minor roadblock for Lyndon. That's kind of how I felt about it. Now I do feel, to your point about level 3 stuff, I think most of the level 3 material in this book comes from Dross's quips or his statements, like the one I just mentioned, more than anything else. And at least for me, if we're going to talk about level 2 or level 3, I think there is definitely something to say about a satisfying way to achieve your goals versus an unsatisfying way to achieve your goals, by comparing and contrasting the way Yeren progresses versus the way Lyndon progresses.
I guess for the first thing I wanted to say is regarding Era's point for the Eggman chapter, is that mostly that I believe was Will's way of giving you just an outside perspective on Lyndon. I don't think it was really meant for us to really delve too much into it. Mostly, not really. I mean, there's some bully stuff in there as far as the might makes right of this entire world structure, but it was mostly just getting that outside perspective, seeing Lyndon with his black flame on, the creepy eyes, and just destroying his enemies. And yeah, as far as that, what is next on our agenda? Do we want to jump into Dross and talk all about him?
Well, if we could, I'd like to circle back to,
Sure.
I guess, the way Yeren progresses versus the way Lyndon progresses.
Yeah.
Because and I'd like to kind of get your thoughts on this. And let me focus here for a second on Yeren, and then I'll contrast that with Lyndon. So Yeren, so they're both trying to eventually achieve and break through to true gold, which is the highest level of advancement you can achieve through, I'll just call it, without any further insider actions, just purely physical advancement. Is that a fair statement?
In this part of the story, yes. I
Okay.
believe you're aware that to get to Underlord takes a revelation or insight that is not strictly physical. I mean, there's still physical aspects to it, obviously, but to achieve that is the first step requiring something other than you could take a pill to get there. And Zeal
So,
mentions that as well. You could take a pill straight to the top of peak of True Gold.
and actually, and I'm glad you mentioned Zeal, because since we mentioned him, I'd like to
Okay.
say that's probably my second favorite new character introduction in the
He
series
is
so far.
awesome. Yeah.
Just like the way he was introduced and kind of his world weary kind of fine if I have to type of thing, right?
Right. He's like Eeyore, or like he's just a very old man that's just in a very young person's body, and he's got a mutilated magic system, and he's just not having a good time. But man, he's a likable character, and I really enjoy any scene he's in.
So anyway, so back to the advancement.
Yes.
So Yeren, she was closer to True Gold than Lyndon was at the beginning of the book, but she had a much more difficult time of achieving True Gold.
Right.
She ended up having to absorb her remnant.
Mhm.
She then still she had to master an ability which she had a lot of trouble mastering until she figured out that she had to place herself like in direct danger with no escape, and that's when she got her chance to do it. And then she had a really cool scene which was really well described by the author, where it's a very anime-ish, very cinematic moment where, like, the whole world goes still and then her power explodes out of her, then back into her, and so it was really cool, right? And I thought, like, even though we get only small parts of her throughout the story, you see her constantly working and failing and working and failing until she finally breaks through at the end, and then she achieves that power. So I like the way that arc went versus Lyndon. And if we're just looking at how Lyndon advances to True Gold, he drinks water, he eats fish, he eats some lizard meat, and he breathes a lot. That's how he advances to True Gold.
A lot.
Okay.
That's it. That's all he does. Mind you, he has some fights and escapes and stuff like that, but those fights aren't directly towards him advancing. Those are towards him escaping or having to get to another location. It has nothing to do with his advancement itself. So I felt the way he advanced was just not fun.
Okay.
I think it's fair to say that watching Lyndon advance was not quite as fun because, like you said, he eats the food or he eats the fish, and then he has to struggle with that, and then he gets to the point where he can eat that fish, and he goes and eats the bigger fish, and he kind of cultivates. But something to compare, like while we're comparing and contrasting them, is the actual paths that they're on.
Mm-hmm.
So Yaren's path is the path of the blade, and the only way to really advance on the path of the blade is by fighting, right? You can't. I mean, let's just try and look at it as objectively as we can, I guess. If you're gonna learn to be a swordsman, you can study your swordsmanship all you want out of a book, out of practicing by yourself, but until you truly practice and engage with another swordsman, your skill level is going to be capped at a certain spot. And then eventually those life or death situations are what's required for you to kind of push past your natural boundaries. Whereas Lyndon's path, the path of Black Flame and the pure path, for lack of a better name right now, is, his Black Flame path is all about destruction and overwhelming might, right? And that one I can definitely see, he needs to be in a fight to really level up that one. But the path of the pure path is it's kind of a different style to its leveling up process.
Yeah,
now,
it's very tough to level that up, and that's one of those is actually just drinking some water and elixirs and things that normally water down a path and that take a long time.
Yeah. So I liked I did like in this story that his black flame that he's been cultivating for 2.5 books,
Mhm.
it's his overwhelming might. It's what he uses whenever he gets into trouble. And he actually can't use it that much inside of Ghostwater because there's very little fire and there's very little destruction.
Mhm.
So it kind of forces him to rely on a part that on his path that he kind of thought was his weakness path is, you know, this is a path that I have that's not very helpful.
Yeah. I think Lyndon's advancement era is right in that watching the specifically advancement parts of his story is boring because there is no action for that. But I believe that I like Lyndon's story more in this book, specifically because of the survivability issues, the fights above his weight class against the Carrie and Harmony, um, learning about new paths, meeting Zeal, meeting Dross, recovering Orthos's longevity and his sanity, and also helping out Little Blue. All these things adding up around Linden make that more interesting to me, and it kind of filled out the boring parts of his advancement.
What do you think? We've been talking for a few minutes here. Tell us we're wrong.
So here's what I'll say. Let me go back to Urine for a second. Her advancement is in part related to further mastery of a skill. So she gets more power, but she only gets more power after she attains a certain level of mastery. So there's skill combined with power with regards to Urine. Whereas Yaren's power is separate from, Lyndon's power is separate from his skill. Now, the part that I did like about Lyndon's story, and this is with the dragon that he fought, is that he did have to become more skillful with his black flame and with kind of combining his two paths to beat her. So I did like that, and that goes back to an earlier complaint I've had now. I think I've mentioned now a couple books where I want to see Lyndon do more than just gather more power. I want to see him become more skilled, become more skillful. And that's really, to me, if I want to really see what I want to see in Lyndon's progression is I want to see him become more skilled, like beat people not through just overwhelming power, but like through using his power more intelligently, like more like how Yeren does or how Ivan does.
Mm-hmm.
That's fair. So, then how did you feel about the final fight that Lyndon's in, where Lyndon has to fight Harmony Akura, and he basically, at least in my mind, I kind of pictured it like the Sherlock Holmes movie with Robert Downey Jr., where he kind of sees everything happening beforehand and he predicts it, like, oh, I'll do this fake punch and then I'll go with this, but with Dross. Did you feel like that was an advancement of his skill combined with Dross, or just it's all Dross and just kind of Lyndon's following the instructions?
That's Dross. That's
Yeah.
exactly what Serial does. Serial uses her presence to say, "Hey, figure out the probabilities of X, Y, and Z," right?
Mm-hmm.
And then the presence gives the information like a highly advanced computer, right? And that's what Dross does. And that actually gets to a question I have for you guys,
Hmm.
because at the end, I have a couple questions about this, about Dross and how he becomes kind of like the. Is it okay if I call him a presence?
That's his goal. Yes. Well, I know that's Lyndon's goal.
Okay. Um, let's just call her a presence. A, is Dross more? And I don't want to say intelligence. Does he have more sentience or sapience than the other presences that we see in the books? That's question one.
Mm-hmm.
And is Dross truly Dross, as indicated by Northstrider, who has his own presence,
Right.
which he believes to be more advanced than Dross? And I know that those are two kind of complicated questions. I'll love to hear what your guys' thoughts are on that.
Okay.
I'll go first. I don't know
Okay.
the answer.
Okay, I know most of it, and I believe actually none of it should really be spoilers, so that's fine. It should just be clarifying some issues. So, Dross is a mind construct, And that's actually what Northstrider has currently, even at the end of this book, is a mind construct. He bonds with us in his mind, just like Lyndon did. The only difference is that because Dross's mind construct was in the Dreamwell, I believe it was, for that long, and the Dream Madra kind of like soaked in for so long, it created basically a personality. So that's what we're seeing as Dross, is that personality. Serial's presence, I don't know the creation of the presence of the Abadan. They may have a personality, but I doubt it. They may opt to remove that if that's an issue, probably. But it's more of just the start, and we see the Akura Harmony fight where he has the information ready, and at the end of Ghostwater, we see that Dross is missing all this information. That's why Ghostwater was designed by Northstrider to take all these trees of knowledge, spread out all these little Drosses everywhere that have no personality, bring them back. They all collectively make this supercomputer presence thing that Northstrider can collect more information for. So Lyndon and Dross are now going on this journey, and Dross is going to be collecting more knowledge. So from here on, every fight's not going to be like the Akara Harmony one, because he doesn't have that information. But it's a possibility for some stuff, so then that's going to be Raphael from there. Does that help? Or
It does help, and that actually leads me to kind of another point I wanted to make about this, because since we talked about Kura Harmony, and we're kind of touching on Northstrider, it kind of combines also what Cesky said earlier about level 2, level 3, and what you discussed in Soulution. So we see Northstrider come up at the end, right? And he is the maximum level of ability that people on Cradle can attain, as far as we know right now.
He is a monarch.
So he's a monarch, and not only is he a monarch, he's a monarch with a presence, right? And what we see of him in Ghostwater is he is solely focused on the very first thing we see him is he's killed a dragon and he's cycling the dragon's Madra to get more power. I mean, that's what we see. That his purpose in life is to get more power. He is the apotheosis. He is what a Cradle person should end up becoming if the only thing that matters is might makes right. I mean, that's what we see, and that's why he kills Harmony at the end. It's not because Harmony is a bad person or a good person, or it's solely because you are of no benefit to me. Die. I mean, he doesn't take any action to kill him, but he takes no action to save him. So, which is very consistent with that might makes right kind of philosophy that we've been seeing throughout the series. And so what I'm interested in seeing is Lyndon is given a purpose in Unsold, right? He's given a purpose. And we see Yearn adopt a purpose, and Ethan has a purpose. And so I want to see more of how that purpose differentiates them from everybody else in this world who thinks that might makes right. That's also kind of like why I'm interested in Mercy too, because Mercy is, hey, she wants to know what it is to have friends. Like, she has another purpose in life, so more than just getting more power, which seems to be what everybody else wants. And I don't know, I have a question there. I just wanted to comment on that and didn't know what you guys thought about that.
Yeah, I want to say first, I know we're going to see more Mercy in the next book, and I think you'll be pleasantly pleased with how and why she came to be where she is and what happens with her in the future. As for their purpose, Lyndon's purpose has always been, from the beginning, to save his family. And I think that plays a huge part in why and it is obviously his weakness earlier in life plays a huge part in the way he acts towards others, where he adopts the might is right, but he's never, just because I'm mighty, I have to be mean to everybody else, kind of a philosophy that everybody else kind of has growing up. If you're not helping me, you're hurting me. But it goes back to what we also, I don't know if we said it earlier, but Zeal, when they're talking, he's like, hey, there's more to life than just advancing. You can advance and advance and advance, and then you're at the top and you just have to keep advancing and you have nothing It's like looking back at your life on your deathbed and being like, well, I wish I'd spent more time at the office cycling, growing stronger, but I have no memories that like empower me to like be happy about it,
Mhm.
So those are
Yeah, I
mine.
think zeal is very useful because I see him as like the old wise man who's kind of beat down, even though he is young. He's got that mindset, and he's like giving these tips to Lyndon. I really like that, like more to life than advancing, and he kind of just reminisces, and it's really funny. He's like, "Oh yeah, I had like the true gold pill would take me all the way," and he's kind of sad, and it's just a different perspective that was nice to see than the might makes right all the time. It was this other guy who's still powerful, had some bad times, and this is just another guy that you're meeting. So it shook it up a little bit.
I do have to say I did like ZL also from the perspective of, to your point, where we've seen Lyndon and Yaren, and even I can like struggling to get more power, get more power, get more power. And Zeal's like, yeah, you take a pill or two and boom, you're true gold. Like big deal. Like
Yeah.
he was less interested in the power in and of itself and more on what experiences do you bring to the table. To my point earlier, like have you mastered what you truly have, or are you only focused on attaining more power? So
Right.
I hope, well, I would like to see more Zeal, and if we don't, I at least hope that Lyndon like learns something from Zeal. So
That'll be a Raffo. So
Yeah. Here's something I wanted to talk about just for, you don't have to say much about it, but Orthos says this to Lyndon while Lyndon's getting ready for his somewhat final fight, and he says, the old you, Lyndon, is dead, and that the difference between your perceived strength and your actual strength, is different. Like you perceive yourself sometimes as a weak person, as a, that someone's always going to be stronger than you. But he says, like, just look at yourself. Like, you're actually a strong person. You have abilities. You've practiced. Don't hold yourself back when you need to be doing what you need to do. And I just took that to show, like, more like just have confidence in yourself. Like, if you're confident, then that perceived strength that others might have in you or that you might have of yourself, you could surprise yourself with your actual strength.
I think you're right. Go ahead.
I think it's a good point, but I think that we now have 5 books worth of evidence that one of Lyndon's core personality traits is a massive inferiority complex. I think that's just a defining characteristic of him, and it doesn't matter how much power he actually has, he will never be able to see himself as having enough power. And so he's always going to want to get more and more and more and more. And the only way he can differentiate himself, the only way that weakness becomes a strength is if he has a purpose behind it. Otherwise, it's just a massive weakness that would, in other people, bring them down.
Yeah. And that's another Raffo as far as anything regarding that specific statement, because I want to say more, but I can't, and I don't want to spoil anything. I will say to Orthos, though, it is nice to see that the Life Well brought a lot more sanity to him, because we already got these little tidbits from Orthos about kind of coaching Lyndon through certain moments when Lyndon really needs it, and I feel like we're going to get more of that now, because he's more coherent and just a healthier turtle dragon. So I'm excited to get more of that.
As we're talking, I think I finally kind of put my finger on what bothers me with Lyndon in this book versus everybody else. Okay,
Okay.
This actually,
I'll hear you out.
It's his lack of agency in this book versus A, his agency in other books, and B, everybody else's agency. Because when you were talking about Orthos, that's what to me came to mind of, yes, Orthos got younger. Yes, Ortho became more sane. But through that, he achieved more agency. He could act more. Dross could act more when he did stuff. Lyndon didn't have much agency, or to the extent he did, it was to eat and drink. So that's what bothered me with Lyndon more than anything else. He didn't purposefully go to Ghostwater. He was just basically thrust there, right? He didn't take the affirmative action of going to Ghostwater. It was the lack of agency that bothered me with Lyndon in the book.
I can see that. I do think, without spoiling anything, that kind of problem isn't as bad going on from here on, because now Lyndon is basically caught up. This is the book that gets Lyndon caught up to Yaren. Mercy is just right there, and they are right below Ithan as well. So from here on, we'll read about that. But for the most part, there's no longer... We're still going to see his inferiority complex, but this is now Lyndon is caught up. So I'm excited to see how he deals with that in the future.
I have an Ithan question, if you guys don't mind. Okay, so we keep getting told that he's an Underlord, right?
He is an Underlord.
But I guess it's a raffo to, it says, like, how do you advance from Underlord to Overlord?
Yeah, I'll raffo that. But I can confirm that as of this moment in Ghostwater, he is an Underlord. Okay,
because his relative power as an Underlord, compared to other Underlords, he dwarfs these other guys. Because every time, they say it's like basically his pure level is like basically the Pacific Ocean. I mean, it's huge in comparison to everybody else, right? So, I guess I'm curious to see, or if you guys have any other thoughts, as to what is holding him back from becoming an Overlord, whether that's a raffo or whether he's doing it on purpose, or I don't know. What are y'all's thoughts?
I won't raffo it, but I'll break down some stuff and I can let you draw any conclusions. We have Ithan is one, he's a planner. We know that, we see that. He plans things. Two, he's definitely not like an Overlord or higher, or something that's veiling down to Underlord. And then three, we see Lyndon using the Heaven and Earth Purification Wheel to get those bigger cores. We see Justin about, he's been doing it for maybe a year, slightly more than a year at most. And Lyndon has already went from his deficient half-size cores each to full-size, if not bigger. So we know that an indefinite amount of time, however old Ithan is, he's been doing at least a decade, probably two, of this Heaven and Earth Purification Wheel. So we're expecting, and only one core, just a gigantic amount. So even though he's not at Overlord, he has the capacity of just an insane amount. So that's just something I'll throw out there to help with the fighting situation.
Yeah, and I think one thing Ethan has been waiting for, and I can't spoil it because I haven't read past 7, so I don't know what happens. But one thing I think that he has been waiting for was something like Lyndon or Yaren to help push him along. Someone that he knows is going to be going the distance, that he can go the distance with, because as they always say, he's like 100 coppers, 10 iron, 1 jade, 1 gold. I mean, there's just the numbers get smaller. Yeah. And so rather than go that alone, he seems to be the person who'd want to go that with somebody else or with other people that he can go with. But I think one reason he's able to fight kind of above or outside of his weight class a little bit, where he could be tougher than most people expect, is because a lot of people don't expect pure Madra, and he's able to kind of basically just disrupt everybody else's plans. Like, I'll use fire technique, and fire plus pure makes crappy fire, and then he can break through it easier. That's my thought as to why he's kind of so powerful there.
That's another point as well. It's very good because, like you said, most paths don't have to deal with pure Madra because it is less than 1% that anybody ever uses it. So they're not really equipped to deal with it as often. So that's a good point.
The thing about Ithan that I do, I assume the author did this deliberately, but by way of contrast to Lyndon, Ithan is a supremely confident person. the one thing he does not lack in any way, shape, or form is confidence. Um, um,
Have you
and
seen
that,
a reason for him not to be though? Have we
well,
seen that yet?
well, so that's why I say confidence and not overconfidence.
Right, he's not
Because,
arrogant.
right, I mean, that's the only reason I
Yeah,
don't
he
say
is kind of arrogant, but
I,
he
but he's
earns
not
it.
overconfident. I mean,
Yeah.
he's never met. I mean, he's never met a being that when he's had to fight. Because, and I'll say this to Ivan's credit, he
Mhm.
doesn't go looking for a fight. But
No.
when he does, I mean, he'll go at it, and he's also smart enough because we've seen him when he has to interact with an archlord or a herald or a monarch, he backs down,
Yeah, he keeps his
and
mouth shut.
he knows when to talk and when to not talk, and so that's why I call him confident and not overconfident.
Right.
So anyway, so I find that an interesting contrast to Lyndon, and I think, and look, and Ivan's earlier indicated that he knows that Lyndon has an inferiority complex, and he's pushing that button deliberately, like he's
Yeah.
doing that on purpose. There's no question about it in my mind. So it's an interesting trio. I'd say between personality-wise, between Yiren, Lyndon, and Ivan, and I wonder what's going to happen when Mercy's added to the mix and Ivan has to interact with her on top of the other two people.
No, I look forward to that as well. I wanted to say something I've been thinking about, and that, the first book was really kind of all about Lyndon,
Mhm.
right? And the second book was mostly about Lyndon, and now Yaren, she was there for most of it. And I think in the second to third book, this stops being just Lyndon's story,
Right.
just Lyndon's book, and that the books become more about Lyndon and Yaren as the two, I would say, kind of like main characters.
Yeah.
They're the ones that we really care a ton about. They're like the ones we're always excited to see. Ethan is still a main character, but to me he's a little less. It's not as much his story as it is their story.
Yeah. He's the
But
distant mentor
yeah.
at that point in the story. Yeah.
Well, and even further, I know he comes in closer. Obviously, he's been coming closer. But to me, it's
Mhm.
all like the main two is Lyndon and Yaren, and Ethan's like a close third with Mercy right there. Do you guys feel that way the same, or am I just up
Yeah.
in the night?
No, I think the second book, like you said, that's when you kind of get the team feel, but it really doesn't hit until the third book because you still have Ethan as just this distant mentor. He pops in, helps them train, pushes their buttons to bond with Orthos, or just throw them in a volcano basically and just say, hey, go train. But once we get to, like, I'd say Skysworn, where you finally actually get Mercy and you realize, okay, kind of like Yaren, she's going to be a part of the group, and you have Ethan, and you already have Orthos, and you got this team forming. That's when I feel like Skysworn, even though I don't like the Skysworn Nazis that Eric calls them, but that I think that's when we actually get the feel of what the series is going to be as a group.
I agree, but I'll say Skysworn's better than Ghostwater for me, whatever it's
Ugh.
worth.
I had a feeling you
Fighting
weren't going
words,
to
I
like
know,
this
but
book. I didn't think you would think Skysworn was better than Ghostwater, though. That kind of hurts.
Okay.
well, I look. Lyndon's a little bit more active. Like he has more agency in Skysworn than
No,
he does.
I understand. I had a feeling you wouldn't like it for these kind of reasons as well. So
I
Well,
think
but
you're 100% right, Era, that it's a lot of the agency is the issue here, where Lyndon has no agency, and it kind of, as much as we love to see him grow, he's not as much of an active participant as he could be in other scenes. So,
well, yeah, and I mean, and look, and what we would see in other books, and see, this is kind of an interesting thing that we see in that I'm seeing in progression literature, right? Is that you will go through the progression of the person from one level to the next.
yeah,
This same thing, like if Lyndon were in a regular fantasy book, right? He would do like he would enter his training, and then you skip to Act 2, and then he'd be True Gold. You wouldn't get a whole book of him leveling up from low gold to True Gold by doing nothing besides eating and drinking. I mean, seriously, you wouldn't do that.
no,
Not in a normal book, but this book is the whole point of it is to show him progressing, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's definitely the style of the progression fantasy, and definitely the style that Will White has chosen for the book. And while it doesn't make sense in other books, it does kind of fit in here. Now, maybe it could have been done a little better, or maybe changed somehow.
Right.
That's up to the future people to figure that part out. So,
The other thing I was interested about is that in every other book up until this one, we see
Mm-hmm.
we see the space doctor, right?
Yes.
there was no
Nothing.
space doctor this book.
There was nothing in this book. So I just found that an interesting choice by the author to not have anything to do with it's the Abaddon, right?
Yeah. Well,
Mm.
it's not necessarily specifically the Abaddon. It's just anything that's off world of Cradle.
Okay.
But yes, there
yeah.
is none in this book, and this is the only book in the series that happens for. Just
Do we know why?
I don't know if he's mentioned on a blog post or anything. It could have been because Skysworn was not well received. He made some changes in Ghostwater, and Ghostwater was well received. He may have decided to cut those to kind of trim some fat and do the story he wanted specific tell for Ghostwater, and it may have just been a chapter that he cut out. But I can't speak for the author. I think that just may be one reasoning why I think he did it.
Well, I would say that's actually interesting, even though it's not directly related to Ghostwater. I do think it's interesting the way self-publishing works and how the authors, from what you're saying, is the author is listening to the fans and then responding to what the fans are saying and modifying his writing choices accordingly. I think that's really interesting because that's not what normally happens.
No, because his writing time is so much faster too, that he does these books about 6 months or so out, sometimes 9, at most 12, but I think most of them are between 6 to 9 months out. So when he gets some feedback, he's still usually on the first, maybe second draft, and he can make some good changes towards the next book when he gets a couple months worth of feedback.
Yeah, I would say that is it can be a dangerous path for the author to go down. Instantly responding and critiquing and changing their work based on what fans want. Now, I'm not saying that he's doing anything wrong or that it's a bad decision. I just think you have to be careful as an author to stay true to what you want to write, and so that you're not just writing to satisfy those loudest fans.
Right.
Make
That's
sure
a
that
good
you're
point.
still happy with it, is all.
I'll say this: I do think that White is a talented writer. I mean, like there's like there's little glimpses. You see, like in a paragraph here, paragraph there, the way he turns a phrase at a certain point. I'm like, he's talented.
Yeah.
No question about it. I would like to see him write something that's not like in such a specific genre, like where I just like him to write like a something more traditional, just kind of see, or something longer where he can kind of like show a little bit more of his chops. That's it.
This is his third series. So his first series is a trilogy that was completed already. And I'll plug his other books. They are the Traveler's Gate series. And he first subverted the trope of the hero as the protagonist of the farm boy. So it follows Simon, and Simon is actually not the hero of the farm that was destroyed. He is just a friend of the hero, and the hero goes off to save the world, and Simon wants to do it on his own and not be the hero. He just wants to save the world even though he isn't the chosen one. Interesting subversion of the trope. And then he also has, I would say it's a bold choice that he did a 2-trilogy duology kind of thing where he would release 2 books at the same time with the opposite viewpoints of each book. So they're about 300 pages, so you follow it's a Lovecraftian kind of nautical assassin vibe, where you follow the assassin as the antagonist of the sailor, and then the other book, it's flipped. You see the exact same story, but from the sailor's point of view. So you could actually go through one trilogy completely, or you could read them side by side. So it's a very interesting choice he made for that as well.
And I think, Era, you'd like that House of Night one, the House of Blades one, the Traveler's Gate,
Yes.
because our main character, his main progression is not I level up and I get more power. It's a lot of skill based, and him learning skills and actually like practicing things versus just I magically achieve a new level of strength.
Right.
But we won't force you to read those yet.
No.
We'll wait on
finish
those
Cradle,
for a little while.
and then we'll plug it. We're like, hey, you should read this. We'll do it. It's just a quick trilogy. That's all.
Just another quick one. It'll be fine.
Yeah.
All right. Was there anything? I see we have some questions here for
I do
Era.
want to get into just one or two of my favorite scenes. I just wanted to mention, and then I'll get into those questions if we can.
Go ahead.
Okay, so Hoarder Linden, because we knew he was a hoarder. This is the first time that we get to see even more of him being a hoarder, because he gets what is essentially something that's only created by sages, heralds, and monarchs. He gets a void key in this book. And it's like a little pocket. Go ahead, Eric. What do you got?
We old people call it a bag of holding, but go ahead.
That's right. Yes, it's a bag of holding for them old D&D players. No, I'm a D&D player as well. So he gets this bag of holding that is so big, it's like a closet. Because this dragon girl that he killed, is super rich. Comes from a super rich monarch family. So we're getting this awesome void key. He literally cries. Tears of joy. So I marked that down. I wanted to mention that. He actually cries tears of joy because he has a closet. And then he also dunks his head in the spirit well. He gets there, he's sorry, that just to me, I had to laugh at that moment. Because he just dunks his head and Zeal's over there in the background like, what is this idiot doing? Like, you don't need to dunk your head. And he's just like gobbling water. He just dunks his head like a thirsty soldier when he finds a river. This is really cool. It's a fun moment.
Now, I do have one other question about the whole like well thing.
Sure.
When he drinks from the life well,
Yes.
does that work in combination with his iron body? Well, in other words, will it make it easier for his Madra to cycle through for his iron body, or is it
No.
just kind of two separate things?
No connection. So the life well is specifically for like orthos, kind of like older creatures or humans. It's your lifeline is basically your spine. So in the Cradle universe, you have like your head, your mind has a dream aura or Madra, I think they've mentioned. You have blood is actually blood Madra. So you create this little pockets of different Madra in your body that just naturally forms. So that's why pure paths are rare, is because it's just you generating that. The lifeline is the life Madra, so it's all up down your spine. That's why it's very rare. So this is strengthening that. There's some benefits that we get into in the next book, so I'm just going to raffle that. But that's what the life well is for. But it's one of those things that's super rare to get, so that's why Northstrider made a well of it. And that's it. That's all I had on my favorite scenes. I just wanted to touch on those before we continued on.
All right, I'll say one thing really quick while you're getting your questions here. When Renfei died, I wished it would have been Byro, the other guy, because Renfei to me, she was kind of a jerk, but it never seemed like she was like the instigator of being a jerk. She was just kind of like going along. It felt like to me with Byro and being like, yeah, come on, I don't trust you. But she was never, to me, outright hostile to them. She was more begrudging that she had to deal with them and that she couldn't have her own real group and blah, blah, blah. So when she died, I wished it had been Byro instead and that she could have maybe survived but gone off differently. So, sorry. That's it.
It's like when you're in high school and like, the big bully pushes you in, so that's Byro. The other dude's just standing there, that's Renfei. She's just standing there, be like, yeah, I'm watching that happen. I don't see an issue with it. But like, I'm okay with that.
Do you know what you call somebody who hangs out with a Nazi?
A Nazi.
Call him a Nazi.
That's true. I didn't say I excused all of her actions. I just said if one of them had to die, I would have preferred Byro.
I assume that she got the easy way out because the other guy is going to be tortured, I assume, or really messed up before he gets killed.
Yeah, I assumed Yeren was going to kill him in this book, and I was kind of surprised that actually didn't happen. So
Well,
when I
no,
read
but
it the first time.
the mercies are definitely going to torture him, like Era said. But
Oh,
that was his own fault. He definitely mouthed off to the wrong person.
yeah.
So,
What he
all
did.
right, sorry. Let's ask our questions now.
Okay, so for the newbie era, we have 2 questions, and then we'll end it on the bloopers because this is the first book that we have bloopers at the end, which are pretty fun. So, the first question I have is: there is a tournament mentioned by Charity, the sage of the Akura clan. What are your thoughts on this tournament? What do you think is going to happen? Do you think it's relevant? Do you think it's just a throwaway line? I'm just having you guess at.
If there's a tournament, then a tournament is going to be an entire book.
Okay.
When that happens, I have no idea. I would assume it doesn't happen right away because he still has to advance, I think, a little bit because given the context of who would likely be a participant in the tournament,
Mhm.
you would imagine it would be people above True Gold. So I would imagine it would at least be past the next book, which is called Underlord. So I presume that that's when he becomes an Underlord.
Right.
So I assume that tournament's going to happen sometime after that. As to what you get, all tournaments, you get an award of something at the end, right? I mean, it'd be
Tournaments have
completely.
prizes.
Yeah. So I mean, I don't know what the prize would
Okay.
be, but I assume it's a prize of some sort. So
A fun prize. Okay. All right, that's
yeah.
good enough. I just want to get some speculation on you. Okay, and then we have another one. Northstrider's importance of. Okay, so he says a word. He says the word hold, and things happen. The entire Ghostwater world stops collapsing. It's spatial. What do you want to call it? Spatial magic,
Cracks.
spatial, all that stuff. All that stops when he says the word hold, and it is bolded, and I wanted to emphasize that to you. What are your thoughts on that? Any speculations?
So I've actually been thinking quite a bit about the whole like monarch thing
Mm-hmm.
because we've now seen 2 monarchs in 2 books, right? So we've seen
Yes.
a monarch Mercy go toe to toe with the equivalent of one of this world's gods, right? Like go to maybe not like defeat the god, but fight it to a standstill.
Right.
And then we see in this book like Northstrider, he created a pocket world and is able to stop it from disintegrating.
Mm-hmm.
So I think hold like that bolded line or that bolded phrase.
Yeah.
I'm assuming is some monarch unique power or monarch language, some type of language or power that's available to monarchs when they create something of their own. I presume Mercy can do something similar with the armor that apparently is a part of their bloodline.
Right.
So I presume that Mercy can do something similar. When I say Mercy, I mean the Monarch Mercy.
Malice.
Malice. I'm sorry. Yeah,
No, it's okay.
Can do something similar.
Right.
So I assume it's some type of Monarch unique power. And then my other thought is, if this is Northstrider's power level, then where does that put Suriel? Like, if she's a scale up from Northstrider, then what could she just obliterate a pocket world like with the word? I mean, I don't know. Like,
Right. Well, I mean, we know she can. Osriel is probably the highest, I'd say, of the Abadan and all that we know of. And Suriel's not on his level, but still pretty close. And we know Osriel can basically instantly disintegrate entire worlds, like all of Cradle, just with his Reaper's Scythe. So I know Suriel could probably definitely do that to not just a pocket world, but an entire world.
Something I saw in this book, I just wanted to also kind of hear Aristotle and maybe your soul is. I noticed that they're talking about the levels, kind of Sage and Herald and Monarch, and I don't remember the exact quote, unfortunately, but they're talking about you progress from Sage to Herald, and then it talks about Monarch as if it's almost like a divergence where you can go Sage, Herald, Monarch, but then you're stuck. And I was wondering if maybe we'll see, because I don't know if there was another path where it's Sage, Herald, and then you can advance to a different path or a different title, that maybe is less talked about, because then you would have to get kicked out of that world, right? Because nobody's, at least in the books as far as I remember, they've never said, oh yeah, look, he was a monarch and then he advanced past that. So maybe he's stuck, you get to monarch and you're the absolute top dog of that world, but then you're stuck. And if you go the harder path where you don't, advance to monarch, then maybe there's something else. But it was a one line or two sentences, and I just wanted your opinion. If you thought maybe I was onto something there.
Well, so I would say, so sage, as I understood it from the book, is that's a special, like, that's somebody who is specialized in something and has some type of specialty in their path, whether it's
Right.
Path of the Endless Sword or Black Flame, whatever, you're a sage.
Right.
And you can get sage at any point. Like, I presume you at least need to be an Underlord, but
Arc
you can
Lord
get a
and
sage.
above.
Excuse me?
It'd be Arc Lord and above is what we know of right now.
So
yeah.
Yeah, so sage is not actually a class per se. So you could be a archlord sage,
right?
Or
Well,
herald sage, or monarch
that
sage.
is true. So I guess the divergence of path on herald to monarch or herald to something else. Do you feel like it's? I mean, what do you think about that then?
We know Osriel comes from Cradle.
Yes.
At least I presume, yeah. So we know he comes from Cradle. I presume that either you become a monarch and are then invited to leave the world, or being a monarch somehow ties you to the world, and then there's another path you can take which allows you to achieve monarch equivalent power or more and not be tied to the world, because that would be consistent with what we know of this magic system. And we know that at least one person has left Cradle and gone on to other things, and we know that Cradle is a pocket world where this happens more frequently than in other worlds.
Okay, no, that's fair. I thought of it, and it kind of just struck me more this time than other times that I've read it. Soul, I'm sure you're just going to give us a raffo here, but what do you think?
Of course, because I want to answer his questions. Like, nope, can't do that. That's can't let him can't spoil them. But yeah, so I'll raffo that. But it is good to get his perspective. I like checking in and seeing what he thinks about that stuff.
Well, I hope my guesses are at least entertaining. So.
Oh, definitely entertaining. Sometime I just want to be like, no, but I don't want to say that. Things like that. But that's okay. I'll wait. So I did want to get into the bloopers, if that's okay, Cesky.
Oh yeah, bloopers. Okay. The bloopers were so funny the first time I read them. I kind of just skimmed them this time, but the bloopers are funny. I mean, aside from the fact that, like, nobody puts bloopers in books because you just write it the way you want to write it.
Yeah.
And then you don't have to, right? But I thought it was fun. So.
He has one of them is where Mercy dies accidentally. A nice little silly scene. But there's one specifically I did want to mention because I know only Cesky and I would have gotten it on this podcast. It's the Valenhall portal is a reference. So Lyndon walks through the Ghostwater portal, and in the blooper he goes into what is essentially like a dark house with a lot of mirrors. I think there's a sword on the wall, and this is a direct reference to the first book of his other series, the Traveler's Gate series, which is, I believe, House of Blades is the first book, Cesky, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So this is the first book in that, and it's directly relevant, and it's a unique little blooper that I kind of liked. It's cool.
Yeah.
I'll say this: Will White definitely has a sense of humor. Definitely has a sense of humor, and he's not. And he's. I mean, that to me, that's usually the parts I like the most about the books are when he lets his comedy flare out. And we see that with Dross. We see that in the last book with Ortho. A couple books ago with Orthos. We saw it in Skysworn with Ithan. So that to me is part of the propulsion. The good propulsion of the books is that he's willing to crack wise and talk meta to the readers.
He keeps it light. He definitely does.
Yep.
And he makes a lot of meta reference jokes that he gets into even more because he does directly work with his fan base, and he definitely takes feedback, and he'll even take some goofy bloopers and throw in some memes and stuff like that. So I'm excited for the bloopers of the next couple books, and they're very funny.
So, Era, are you telling me that you didn't laugh out loud when Mercy read, "This is the weapon my mother carried from Low Gold to Archlord, Bowie McBowface"?
That's pretty good.
Okay,
Pretty
okay,
good,
we
huh?
got it.
That's pretty good. I mean, like,
Yeah.
look, Will White has a sense of humor. I
does.
generally laugh at his jokes. Don't get me wrong. I mean,
Yeah.
I do think he's funny. So
We
Oh,
get
I
more with
just-
Dross now, so it's
he
nice.
he has a non-Sanderson-esque sense of humor where
Mhm.
I don't think he like look. The one quibble you'd have with Sanderson is that, like, you know, his comedy seems forced, right?
Right.
While Will White's definitely forcing the comedy in there, it still flows naturally from his writing style. It's just something he's good at.
Yeah.
Oh, I think that's definitely it. Is there anything else that you guys wanted to talk about or have us discuss or bring up before we conclude this episode of Ghostwater? No, we're good. Okay.
All good.
Well, thanks everybody for listening. Thanks, Era. Thanks, Soul, for being on here with me and talking about Ghostwater of Gwyn. Let's like to give a shout out to the Legendarium podcast, of course. They're the main podcast where we are just the sub podcast here, giving our thanks to them for letting us do this. And thanks to everybody again for listening, and have a good day.